To most of the drugs that we use in medicine today, it's very harmless. It just doesn't do that much to the physical body.
But marijuana remains one of the most illegal substances on the planet. In US law, it is placed in the most dangerous category, Schedule 1.
It's in that schedule that drugs like LSD, heroin, and marijuana are placed. And drugs that are in that schedule can't be used at all. They're completely off limits. You can't even do any clinical research. For the last 19 years, all efforts to pry cannabis out of Schedule 1 and just move it to Schedule 2 have failed.
In 1972, the US Drug Enforcement Administration's senior judge, Judge Francis Young, commenced hearings on marijuana.
He came up with a 60-odd page opinion saying marijuana is probably the safest drug in the pharmacopoeia, and it certainly has medical utility, and it should be moved to Schedule 2. It's quite extraordinary just how steadfast the U.S. government has been in not allowing this to be used as a medicine. My hunch is that there's some kind of fear that if we use it as a medicine, the camel will get its nose under the tent, and heavens only knows what might happen.
As Judge Francis Young said, it's unreasonable, arbitrary, and capricious, and I add immoral to that list.
It's become so expensive on the street now that frequently these people who need it for medicinal reasons grow it, and they get caught.
I was arrested and taken to a county jail, which was pretty unpleasant, for the illegal rape, as I call it.
I tried it, and I was able to actually cook a meal and eat it. And ever since then, we smoked it for 2 years, and then that's when we got arrested.
12 agents from the local Vice Squad played Miami Vice, shattered their front door, put guns to their heads, drug them off to jail.
I didn't have no shoes because they didn't let me, you know, put my shoes on. So I went to jail barefooted. That was my worst nightmare that I've ever had.
It's just awful that these people should have to suffer this way. I mean, the law imposes, here are people who are already suffering from serious diseases and disorders and symptoms, and the law is now imposing another layer of anxiety on these poor people.
The American pharmaceutical establishment and government have been very reluctant to allow people to use marijuana for these purposes, because to do so would be to admit that it had positive uses. And one of the fictions that has to be maintained in the war against this evil plant is that it has no redeeming qualities. And if you established a therapeutic use for it, that would be a redeeming quality. So instead, the government wants people to use synthetic THC or analogs of THC. In my experience, those substances are more toxic and often do not have as good effects as marijuana itself.
THC, or tetrahydrocannabinol, is the active ingredient in marijuana. Ironically, synthetic THC, marketed as Marinol, is legally available for medical use.
Doctors, pharmacists, pharmaceutical companies are very threatened by the idea of people having direct access to substances that really work. And so there is a lot of effort to scare people away from natural medicines by telling them that they're dangerous, that things out of nature are more dangerous for you than the products of pharmaceutical companies. And I think that is not a good thing to tell people. In my experience, natural medicines are much, much safer than synthetic and refined ones.
This realization is spreading. In 1991, Dennis Peron launched a San Francisco citywide referendum for medical marijuana. Proposition P won by a landslide. This preceded similar victories in several other US cities and the California statewide initiative of 1996. Now, in downtown San Francisco, the Brownie Mary Rathburn building is home to the Cannabis Buyers Club that serves marijuana to 10,000 patients. Attempts by the federal DEA to close down the building and arrest Peron and his staff have been firmly blocked by the San Francisco city authorities.
2 million people are infected with the HIV virus. 500,000 people get cancer every year. These people are our brothers and our sisters, our relatives, our aunts and uncles, people we love. I don't think that any of these people, any of these relatives would stand in the way of their brothers and sisters getting a medicine that would help them.
Unfortunately, modern usage of the hemp plant centers around only one of its many uses, its ability to alter consciousness. Like the other uses, this is also not a recent phenomenon.
The oldest domesticated plants are the drug plants. We have historical evidence that they were domesticated by people before food crops. In various cultures throughout history, marijuana has been valued because it was a doorway to other states of consciousness.
It's a blessed plant. It's a blessed plant.
It can give you a little happiness.
Marijuana has been an important religious sacrament throughout Africa, the Middle East and Asia for thousands of years. In Hinduism, the god Shiva is said to have brought cannabis from the Himalayas for human enjoyment and enlightenment.
शिव शिव जितना पी उतना जीव जे न जाने गांजा के कली वो लड़का से लड़की बम बम.
Why then is marijuana use so controversial in Western culture?
Marijuana cultivation and use in Europe probably was mainly as a fiber plant and food plant. And it's very possible that many people who grew it for fiber and for seeds did not know of its use as a psychoactive drug.
Terence McKenna is a leading researcher and author on the traditional uses of psychoactive plants.
The absence of a straightforward hallucinogen or psychedelic in the flora of Europe has given Western man a kind of particular horror of the kind of boundary-dissolving experiences that attend these plants. Another factor is the Christian Church. The reliance of magical folk practitioners on plants was consistently suppressed by the Church. So we have evolved our peculiarly alienated form of science and social polity completely in the absence of any connection back into the magical side of nature that Celtic and earlier peoples were very concerned to cultivate. So this, I think, is the source of our particularly destructive relationship to the earth and our particularly alienated state of social relationships among ourselves. Only 100 years has Western humanity and civilization actually grappled with the dilemmas which these substances pose. So we're at the beginning of making an adjustment which many traditional societies made a comfortable accommodation to millennia ago.
Our beginning to make an adjustment has been a rough one.
Our nation has zero tolerance for casual drug use.
When I was in England, I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it, and didn't inhale, and never tried it again.
If you do drugs, you will be caught. And when you're caught, you will be punished.
One of the major concerns is drug use among young people.
I think marijuana can make kids space out and lose their concentration, and I think the only remedy for that is good drug education, especially aimed at young people, about what are appropriate uses of it and what aren't. And I don't think it's a good idea to be stoned in school, for example. But we don't have any real drug education at the moment because in the present climate, That's impossible.